Throughout the Jedi and Sith history, holocrons have remained not only a staple, but the most important artifact in all of the lore. Despite simply being compact repositories of knowledge and interactive learning devices, entire wars have been fought over holocrons, containing the knowledge, experiences of the most prominent Force wielders in galactic history. Anyone can use these pieces of technology to learn at the feet of a legendary master of the Force, and with their power, many have become great Jedi, or terrible Sith. It was because of these artifacts that the Jedi and Sith orders both survived as long as they did. In canon, Luke found a massive trove of Jedi holocrons that were spirited away by Jocasta Nu during Order 66, effectively saving the most paramount of information about the Jedi Order for a new order to be founded upon. In the same way, the Sith passed down their own holocrons from master to apprentice during the Rule of Two era, keeping their legacy moving strong until the culmination of their grand plans. Holocrons are incredibly important, but even more so, still incredibly mysterious. Their make, their function, and purpose often gets lost in translation. There are so many holocrons that get mentioned all throughout history, so it's hard to keep track of what they do and who they originally belong to. So my friends, today we will be opening our own databases to go through the history of holocron technology, how they are made, how they are used, plus all of the different kinds. So without further ado, let us begin. Let's begin with their histories. Holocron tech has a fascinating story. It dates back hundreds of thousands of years, prior to the Republic or the Jedi Order in fact. Holocrons were being used as far back as the days of the Celestials, when they were the prominent rulers of the galaxy. It's even been theorized that they were the ones who pioneered this technology. Whenever the Celestials left the known galaxy though, the knowledge of holocron construction fell into the hands of another species, one far more terrible, the Rakata. Later on, they were forged into the Infinite Empire. The Rakata would use and share the knowledge with the Sith purebloods on how to create a holocron. When invading the world of Korriban, they had first attempted to buy the favor of the king, the Sith ruler King Adis, in order to hide their true intentions of domination and conquest. King Adis of course gladly accepted the knowledge that they were offering, but saw right through their deceit and waged a war against them after learning this. This is fascinating because it confirms that it was actually the Sith that beat the Jedi to the race of obtaining holocron technology. The holocron on King Adis would continue to live for the rest of the known Star Wars timeline, and we created our own video detailing the entire bloody journey of that holocron through the stars. Adis did something unique with his holocron. He had actually imparted a part of his being within the holocron, a piece of his own essence and soul if you will, giving the holocron a suspicious amount of individuality, and perhaps even a sinister will of its own. But moving on the history, once the Infinite Empire was driven off of Korriban, the use of holocrons continued with each Sith king until the technology was discovered by the Dark Jedi Sorzis Sin. Sorzis had found that her first Sith holocron in the sanctum of Shaka Kla, and the holocron belonged to King Nagru. From within the holocron of King Nagru, Sorzis Sin would come to learn of Sith alchemy, improving her skill tenfold in the old art. In her journal, Sorzis Sin goes on to compare Sith holocrons to that of Jedi holocrons, stating that perhaps it was the ancient Jedi who had copied the technology of the Rakata in order to create their own holocrons using the light side of the Force. The first Sith holocron to be recovered by the Jedi at the end of the Great Hyperspace War would be known as the Dark Holocron. The Dark Holocron's creator is unknown, but it is said to have contained knowledge of nearly 100,000 years in its antiquity. But what made the Dark Holocron even more deadly is a gift that went along with it. More dark side knowledge and power for whoever owned it. At one point during the Clone Wars, Dooku had a particular artifact a part of his own personal connection, and his power in the dark side increased dramatically, causing him to be undefeatable by any Jedi beneath the absolute best of the Jedi Order, such as Windu, Anakin, and of course Grandmaster Yoda. But how are they made? How they're made is actually much lesser known. It is a well-guarded secret by both the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi have an entire sect of Jedi Sentinels known as Jedi Artisans, those that specialize in crafting of artifacts such as holocrons. But any Force wielder can make one if they know the techniques. Ironically, we know far more about the construction of Sith holocrons than we do of Jedi holocrons. The main difference between Jedi and Sith holocrons is their shape and of course their Force alignment. While Jedi holocrons are cubical, representing balance and evenness in the Force, Sith holocrons are pyramidal, emulating the ancient Sith temples of Korriban, harkening back to the Golden Era. This shape is not only representative of their views of the Force, but it is also meant to replicate the angles of power found in Sith tombs, and in their very culture. It is said that the pyramidal shape of the temples and the holocrons channels the dark side of the Force directly towards the center of these structures, making them more potent. But as a basic definition, a holocron is a box with a crystalline structure made of intertwined filaments, which are thread-like fibers or strands. They are capable of storing near infinite amounts of data within them. One may even say that the internal technology of a holocron is much like a strand of DNA, tiny but able to store an incredible amount of information. A Force user could basically download their entire mind's worth of knowledge and memories into their holocron, and still have ample amount of space for more data. However, according to Source's Sin, from what we know about Bane's attempt to make a holocron, it is a precise and an exhaustive application of the use of the Force. Each holocron matrix had to meet stringent specifications, usually requiring thousands of precise alterations and adjustments, many of which on a subatomic level. This process can be extremely taxing on the user, as the holocron, much like a lightsaber, cannot simply be constructed with tools, but with the Force alone. This process can take anywhere from a few weeks for a skilled user to a few months of painstaking work. As Darth Bane discovered the hard way, no holocron is the same, and each must be individual to the user. It cannot simply be a replica of another holocron. This is because there are inscriptions written on the sides of the holocron that are unique to each user, which helps them channel their power within. You see, holocrons aren't just technology, but they are somewhat of a living entity within the Force. Many Sith holocrons are carved with hieroglyphics, which form a sorcerous seal that unleashes a curse on the unworthy. But not only this, but it was a ritual that they had to perform in order to infuse the holocron with dark side power. This ceremony was known as the Rituals of Invocation, and was paramount in maintaining the Matrix's stability after it was infused with dark side energy. As a side note, some small objects could be contained within holocrons as well. An example of this is Darth Endedu's holocron, which famously contained a red lightsaber crystal, which Dooku would ultimately take for himself as a prize. Following this, the Sith would need to invoke the Rite of Commencement, which was in effect the ritual in where the Sith Lord would begin to pour their essence into the holocron. In Sith holocrons, there is something called a capstone that must be placed at the very top. This was a piece of information that Darth Bane struggled to find the most. All of the capstones wherein the creator must capture their own cognitive essence before the fine-tuning must begin. This prevented the cognitive network from degrading, and only then could one truly begin to create their own holocron. This would effectively make the device immortal until it was purposefully destroyed. It could not die with age. The capstone was a black crystal housed within the center of the device. It was a vital part of a Sith's holocron construction, and this was also the housing place of the Gatekeeper. The Gatekeeper is one of the most misunderstood elements of both a Jedi and a Sith holocron. Obviously, when one opens it, they must learn from it. But not every holocron is going to have a holographic image or text floating above it. Most of them have what is called a Gatekeeper. They serve as guides to the knowledge contained within. The Gatekeepers are holographic personas of the creator of the holocron most typically. The two biggest things to understand here is that Gatekeepers are not just video recordings of the Master, but that some holocrons indeed carry the spirits of their creators. But the Gatekeeper is not that spirit. What the Gatekeepers are is an artificial recreation of the Master that serves as a guide, or a hindrance to those seeking knowledge. They are programmed with the knowledge and memories, as well as the personalities of the Masters. The last part is the most tricky for one to navigate, as since the Gatekeepers contain the personality of the Master, they could refuse to teach a student further until the student has mastered what they have already learned, or in the case of a Sith, the Gatekeeper may try to deceive them, to play tricks on them, or they may be jealous of a rising student, refusing to divulge any more knowledge. One of the most fascinating parts of a Gatekeeper is that they themselves have a certain level of Force sensitivity. Jedi Gatekeepers could sense the ability and level of a Jedi and offer or restrict information. They did this so that Padawans were not shown information too advanced or dangerous. Navigating the Gatekeepers, especially a Sith Gatekeeper, is more of a mental game than simply turning the holocron and getting a lecture. This is the fundamental difference between the holocrons and datacrons. Holocrons are infused with the Force, whereas datacrons aren't typically, and datacrons don't have a Gatekeeper at all. This brings us neatly into the different kinds of holocrons. They are usually cubic or pyramidal variants, but the Jedi have actually created many more shapes. They have crafted holocrons that are octahedrons, hexahedrons, and the Great Holocron itself is a dodecahedron. The Great Holocron is a massive one which contains the knowledge of not just a single Jedi Master, but many over the course of the Order's entire history. Most of the notable Jedi Masters of the Order attribute the most valuable pieces of their knowledge towards the Great Holocron. They do this to actively further the Jedi's progression. For example, the Jedi Master during the Second Great Schism told of the 100-Year Darkness and the lore there. Obi-Wan Kenobi was also given the privilege of adding to the Great Holocron, and he spoke of dueling the first Sith in 1,000 years. Mace Windu shared his knowledge of Vapad, Kit Fisto recorded his knowledge on waterproofing lightsabers, and etc. The Sith had something similar to this known as the Telos Holocron. The Telos Holocron was passed down in the order of the Sith Lords along with others. The Telos, though, was something unique for the Sith to do or participate in, since hardly any of them wanted to further their power or the knowledge of another. They were selfish, incredibly, and many didn't bother with the Telos Holocron unless they believed that it would make the Order as a whole more powerful and that they could benefit. A good example of this is Darth Bane, who recorded the philosophy of the Rule of Two into the Telos Holocron, as this furthered the goal of the Sith. Even Sidious contributed to the Holocron at one point, offering excerpts from his Dark Side Compendium, which was a book and a manifesto that he wrote instead of making a holocron of his own. But the final thing to note about holocrons is that they do not just contain knowledge, but they also contain power. They are force-sensitive objects after all. We talked about how some of the Sith holocrons can unleash curses, but they can also unleash the spirits of the Gatekeeper. This occurs when the capstone is destroyed. Even Sorza Sin mentioned that it would be better to flee then than to face down the vengeful spirit of a Gatekeeper. But Sith holocrons also had the ability to lure someone in, to twist their mind into desiring more knowledge. Holocrons were incredibly alluring and could corrupt someone's mind to insanity just by being near them. Or as seen in the case of the holocron of the planet of Zygula, they could cause an immense amount of pain to a Jedi within the vicinity. On the same note, Jedi holocrons could project auras of calm and peace, shedding light and clarity if one were near an open one. And of course, it goes without saying that one needed to be force sensitive in order to actually open a holocron. Some holocrons wouldn't open without a key, such as a memory crystal. But once they are open, anyone, including non-force sensitives, can learn from them. And that is the history and the function of holocrons. I think that they were one of the best introductions into the Star Wars lore. Holocrons help to fill in a lot of the gaps, and they serve as a catalyst for any being to learn, especially for those that do not have a formal master. As a cool piece of trivia, the very first holocron to ever appear in lore is known as the Tedran holocron. This was a Jedi holocron that Sidious had in his collection. It was found by Leia in the Dark Empire series. I don't have a lot of taste for the Dark Empire comics personally, but I greatly appreciate them for introducing this piece of the lore. The Tedran holocron was great in history, as apparently Sidious had actually used it to discover how to transfer his spirit into a new body. It also contained the Gatekeeper of Bodo Voss, the offspring of Vodo Siosk Voss, who was the Jedi Master of Exar Kun. Using the Tedran holocron, Luke was able to start up his Jedi Praxium on Yavin 4, and he learned a lot of important history about the Great Sith War from this holocron. I really like how all of the holocrons are unique and powerful in their own way. No two holocrons say or do the same thing. Legends Continuity or the EU did a lot more with holocrons than canon has, but they did get quite a bit of love from Star Wars Rebels thanks to Ezra and Kanan. But anyway, my friends, we hope you enjoyed this breakdown, and if there is another subject that you would like us to take a deep dive on, be sure to comment it down below. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us in the archives today, and may the Force be with you.